Buying a bike or bike parts off eBay is big business. And with good reason. You can find loads of good and interesting and potentially rare bits of bike on there. We covered how to buy a used bike just last week, but buying a bike off eBay tends to be slightly different because it's unlikely that you'll be able to go and see it first. So you are just going off photographs, and that is a riskier proposition. So with that in mind, I would much rather buy a bike off eBay that I can actually go and see. It's close enough to home. However, if you can't, and that's probably the likely option, what can you do to make sure you're buying something half decent? My first tip would be to buy a brand that you're familiar with. There is an awful lot of weird stuff lurking around on the internet, but buying a familiar brand at least eliminates some of the risk of going second-hand. Yeah, you might not get the warranty, but at least you know that it was decent when the product was new. Is the bike or other parts in the photos clean? Because, I don't know about you, but if I was going to sell something, I would make sure that at least it looked like it was in good condition. Because if someone hasn't even been bothered to clean the bike for its eBay photos, I think you can guarantee that it's probably not been very well looked after. So you want to proceed with a little bit more caution. A poorly maintained bike isn't necessarily one to be avoided though. You just have to factor into the price of the bike the cost of replacing a few key parts. So that might be brake cables or brake pads, new chain possibly, and therefore cassette and chain rings, maybe bottom bracket. The list does go on. Now hopefully you wouldn't have to spend that money, but this way, if you do, you're not going to be upset at having to invest in order to get the bike back to as good as new condition. Don't be afraid to ask questions of the seller. Although, don't be one of those people that asks annoying questions that have already been mentioned in the description. So do not ask Dodgy Geezer 69 what this bike was made out of, because look, it's clearly said there, it's made out of something metal. Instead, you might say, well, when did you last change the chain? Or why are you selling? How much did this bike get ridden? Although, before the last 3 years. And indeed, where was it stored? Although again, don't ask Dodgy Geezer that, because he said he's just dug it out of the garage. Seriously though, if someone has looked after their bike, the chances are that they will happily and very easily be able to give you the answers to your questions and give you a little bit of reassurance. Another good, although far from fail-safe technique is to look at the feedback that's been left on the seller. Now, I wouldn't buy a bike on this alone, but you can tell a lot about what type of seller someone is from their feedback, and then also have a look and see what other items they've previously sold. Alarm bells would be ringing here, I'm not going to lie. Here is a super cool tip that John, who works here, not Chocolate Voice, another one, just told me about. People make mistakes when listing items on eBay. So they might, instead of writing Colnago, write Colnago, or Colangi, or Colnag, or Colongo. Would you believe it? Anyway, so when searching for something that you want, head over to fatfingers.com, which is basically a website that searches for spelling mistakes on eBay. So you could find yourself a total hidden bargain. So you have found something that you like. Now you have to buy it. We won't go into too much detail here because it's probably worth a video in itself, but do have an idea of what the bike is worth and then offer what you'd be happy paying. That way, if ultimately you do get outbid, you won't have any regrets. If, when you do get the bike, it's a complete pile of pants, then there is one possible thing that you can do. If it's not as described, although be careful about loose descriptions, and you have paid using PayPal, then eBay has some kind of money back guarantee. So you may well be able to send the bike back and get a refund. But having said that, if you've already put into place and practice all of our previous points, then it shouldn't ever really come to that. Just do your groundwork, ask plenty of questions, and scrutinize those photos thoroughly. Now, do make sure that you have subscribed to GCN before you leave this video. It's very easy, just click on the globe. It's completely free. And then, if you want more content, well, I talked earlier on about that video about how to buy a used bike. If you want to see that, you can get through to it just over there. Or if you want to see how to recondition old bikes, we've tackled a couple of bits and bobs, including a rear derailleur, which was quite hard, but very good fun. And that video is just down there.